So hello, everybody. Thank you for coming to Writer's Lunch. Normally, I have Sean do the intros, and I accidentally started. So, Sean, why don't you take it from me? Because you're better at this than I am.
My voice is gone. I'm sorry. It's been taken. Absolutely. Oh my. Thank you guys for coming to Writer's Lunch. As Shannon said, super awesome co-host. And yes, I do believe she's got something coming up in a couple of weeks as well. This week we do have Ian talking about writing twists. I'll let him introduce himself as well. As you can see, Ian at tomeworksedits.com, because we have started an editing collective. So that's very fun with all of your hosts from Writer's Lunch. And that's really cool. Other than that, Ian has just passed in a manuscript of 150,000 words to the group. So his beta readers were checking it out for him, and is excessively tired. So if he freezes, just hit the reset button on your computer during Writer's Lunch today if need be. Ian, thank you so much, and I'll let you take it away.
We didn't have to tell them all that, but okay. I put on my makeup. I wanted to be dewy.
No, you're great, man. Come on, it's context. Great.
So
it's always good to pump the things that you're doing, and even if you
don't
like saying it, I think that's
I got like 1 hour of sleep. That
is awesome that you did that, and so that's the thing is what I'm saying. Absolutely.
Sean is right though. I did turn in a manuscript yesterday for a superhero web serial that's on my little list of things I do. I'm very excited about that. But I was up until like 5 a.m. polishing it to a shine. I'll say shine because I'm pretty proud of how far I got in terms of revisions. But so I'm Ian Michael Everett. Sometimes I am a Houston-based local writer, fantasy, sci-fi, horror-ish writer. I also edit with Tomeworks, as Sean has mentioned. I write a web serial that you can read online for free called Inheritors. It's a top 50 of all time on top web fiction ranking. I am an eternal dungeon master for D&D. I run like 4 games right now, and I'm in like 2 more. I love D&D a whole lot. It's like one of my very favorite things in the world. And I'm not doing any of that or working my day job. I kick a bag with a bunch of people in a gym for Muay Thai, which is kickboxing. But yeah, that's me. And today we're going to be talking about writing twists, but I did want to put a warning here. There will be spoilers. I've tried to pick stuff to talk about that is very old, like, older than like a decade at least. It may not always be the case. I'm going to open the chat so I can make sure I got that up there in a little corner for me.
Yeah, let me stop and make a point about spoilers and stuff like that, which is, if you're peeling back the layers of being a writer, of putting this out there, you kind of got to get away from feeling bad about spoilers, because when you're doing your own work and you're discussing it with other people, you can't hide that structure. And since twists are a huge part of writing structure, plot structure, there will be spoilers. And this is good practice for, if you are working on something and you're describing it to someone. I'm not saying in an elevator pitch. I'm not saying when you're trying to sell someone your book directly that you're telling them the twist, but you will have to, in a synopsis, very possibly in a query letter, spoil some or all of your book for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely if you do a synopsis. And maybe not the query letter. The query letter is, I think we've discussed these before. That's like, I feel like the query letter is usually Act 1 stuff, maybe a little bit of Act 2 to set up like what's the thing that, drives the journey or whatever. But definitely if you send in a synopsis, you have to get used to like being very dry cut about your work and like presenting it and, spelling out what the twists are. But I'm more that is the literary writing angle. I hope that we will discuss a lot of that today. I am going to come at this from more of like a general, like, here's what twists are, and we can talk about it. And hopefully that opens up a bunch more discussion. But yeah, so I'm going to just jump right into it. What is a twist? I think we all know what a twist is, but I did the obligatory defining slide and we can dither about this. But for me, it is a unexpected turn in a story. Usually it's shocking to the reader and or characters. It's an event that challenges the reader's perceptions. It's the moment people will froth about on Reddit for years after the story comes out. It is it's a well done twist, in my opinion, is one that kind of recontextualizes the story. Maybe is obvious, maybe not, but the foreshadowing is there, and then you kind of feel like the story, the media, whatever, pulled the rug out from under you and left you on your ass in a good way. And I mean, a really well done twist is talked about for years and years to come. And you can see my little example there. There's a Sixth Sense, which spoilers has a big twist in it. It's an M. Night Shyamalan film. That was what he was known for a long time, was just doing twists pretty much. But we'll go over a little bit about that. I'm going to move on, but does anyone want to argue with me about that definition, or are we all on the same page there?
I am just shocked that M. Night Shyamalan has twists in his movies.
This becomes the thing, is that, there was a twist in that, and he became known for that. And then several movies later, after all the twists and the aliens in Signs were, could be squirted with a water gun and it killed them.
Yeah.
Everyone knew that. So then you watch an M. Night Shyamalan movie and you know that a twist is going to happen. So,
and not always a good one.
No,
don't always do a twist.
There is one of his movies that gets shit on a lot. The Village, I always thought had a really cool twist. I liked it. I know not everyone loved it, but I liked it. There's kind of
I saw that coming.
That's a good one.
I ruined that movie for people in the theater. I saw it coming. I'm bad. Don't go see movies with me.
But there are kind of two twists in that movie. There's the twist of who is the monster, and there's also the twist of, oh shit, they're living in a weird reserve, that thing. But anyway, that's neither there. Yeah, it is divisive. So I say, you see Nicole and Sean are like, they don't like it. And that's fine. Like, I think that's fine. I don't know that it's a bad twist or a good twist. For me personally, I enjoyed it, but that, a lot of this is going to be really subjective. And
I was going to say, I thought it was not good, but other people like you do enjoy it. So it in part is audience, in part it's like when it hits you, like makes difference. It has something to do with it, what you've experienced. Okay, continue on, my friend.
I meant to build this list out a little more, but I'm definitely hoping people will add on to it. But I picked a couple of examples of what I think are some good twists. They mostly come from movies because I think that's where a lot of people experience twists. For example, M. Night Shyamalan. He has some really good ones and some really stinky ones, but the really good ones is Sixth Sense is the one that I think is probably the one that's the most famous. Is the one that's like recontextualizes everything about the movie. It kind of seems obvious in hindsight, but like on your first watch, you're like, oh shit, when you find out, I'm going to spoil it, Bruce Willis is dead the whole time. That's the whole thing. That's been a movie for 20 years. If you don't know that by now, that's your fault. But then Unbreakable, I really like this twist. The little low to the earth, greedy fantasy superhero story where you find out that the person that reached out to him, the mentor figure, is actually also the villain. He's the one who's been orchestrating all these catastrophic events to find people with supernatural abilities, and he happened to find Bruce Willis finally. And I always thought that was a super interesting recontextualization of a standard superhero trope. I thought that worked really well. But again, this is all subjective. Christopher Nolan is known for his Memento, has the John G. reveal where you find out that the entire time he's hunting a man that's already dead and is being taken advantage of because of his short-term memory loss. And then you have The Prestige, which The Prestige is probably Nolan's best weird twist, where you find out that both the guys, these competing magicians, are trying to do the same trick, which is transporting man, where he appears in one place and then appears in another, seemingly impossibly. And you find out that Christian Bale's character accomplished it by secretly being twins the whole movie, and the Hugh Jackman's character accomplished it by literally drowning his own clones in a vat of acid. So spoilers for that, but also like I don't even know if telling that twist spoils it. Get Out is an excellent one. I feel like Nope is not as twisty because I feel like it happens in the earlier acts of the movie where you figure out what's going on, but it doesn't try to be a twist so much as Get Out kind of tries to be a twist. In terms of books, I think Ender's Game is one that I think about a lot in terms of twists where, Nope is fantastic, don't get me wrong. I just don't feel like it's super twisty. But Ender's Game ends where Ender, you think the whole time he's been doing these academy battle sci-fi games where he's being challenged by the guy that runs the academy, and he learns that actually no, the entire time he's actually been commanding real people to do real battles in real time, and he ends up genociding a whole species of people that they're scared of. And I thought that was an excellent twist. I thought, he was surprised by it too, which is what was, to me, those are the kinds of interesting ones where it challenges not just the reader, but the character too. But does anyone else have any great examples? I'm seeing a lot come up in the chat, but I'd love to hear because I'm not one. I feel like this comes up a lot in detective fiction, thriller fiction, and those are not areas I read in a lot. But I know that there are people here that do. Sean, the first Saw is really good. That twist was really, really excellent.
Me. Sean and I are in the same account, but yeah, like that one. It was one of the few times I've ever been like, oh.
Yeah. I'll leave the floor open for a second before I move on. Also, why is Bruce Willis in 2 really good twisty movies by M. Night Shyamalan?
Have you ever seen Primal Fear, Ian?
I have not, no.
Okay, unless I'm calling it the wrong thing. This was, I think, from the 90s, and I saw it when I was a kid. And it had Richard Gere, if I remember correctly, and Ed Norton. And Ed Norton was very young at the time. And so he was arrested for a murder, but he has like dissociative personality disorder. And Richard Gere is trying to prove that he had no control when things happened. And then at the very end, after he's essentially he's not innocent, but he's getting a separate trial essentially for being crazy. Mm-hmm. He talks to Richard Gere through the bars and he's like, no, this is the real me. So he was faking the innocence the whole time. So it was, I'm not making it sound great, but like it.
No, I get you mean though. Yeah. Really it's hard to like dissect these in a way that doesn't, sound super like an occasion, like, experiencing it is different than just like telling people what happened. But I'll move on. Why do we like twists? Well, what about them makes them so compelling, and why do so many people attempt them, and why do we get all these attempts that turn out awful? What is, for me, that was an interesting question, is why even attempt it when like 70% of the time that it's attempted, people will either say, oh, yeah, or, not even like it, or you'll get very divided responses. Some people love it, some people hate it. M. Night Shyamalan is what? How many films does he have in his career? And he's like 4 for that many. if you're being generous like I am. But, for me, I think, like I said in the beginning, is a really well done twist, even a good twist, it's memorable. It's, unexpected. It can elevate a standard story into an incredible one. And in some genres, I think it's also expected, like detective fiction, you kind of expect there to be a red herring and then a twist on who you think the killer is. That's almost rote at this point. But I picked Ned Stark's death at the end of book 1 of Game of Thrones, or A Song of Ice and Fire, or season 1 of Game of Thrones, depending on how you experience that. That's a really excellent twist, because for the whole time we've expected him to be the main character. Especially if you're reading it in the book, he's set up to be fairly stock standard, hero fantasy protagonist, Aragorn style, and then he gets his head fucking cut off, like right at the end of book 1. And what that does then is, you're not expecting it. You're not expecting that to happen. The story is turning the corner, is a phrase I've heard. And now it can go in a lot of interesting different ways. And I think that's, that a good twist makes a story, it changes the context before and after. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But
Ian, if I can just make this little point, which is, you're saying sometimes it's hard to dissect these and think about them, and also relating it to mystery fiction as well. Yeah. Mystery, seems to me that is a part of the expectation. In the same way that romance will have 2 people, getting together at the end, mystery will have a plot twist that solves the mystery. And so in a way, the way that we're thinking about plot twists in all sorts of other genres is outside of mystery. There can be mysteries that have plot twists, but you have to double the plot twist, like Memento. This exportation of the plot twist from the mystery genre to other things. I love how you're saying some of them work, some of them don't. And you basically have a batting average of them working. Yeah. And that's so true, because genre expectations in other genres are not mystery ones.
Yeah. And I think like people that read mystery probably get into it because they like that thrill of the unexpected, the answer that comes out of nowhere. But if you're an intelligent reader, you are rewarded for paying attention to some of the more subtler clues. But I think that while if you move out of mystery, if you move out of that kind of genre, I think you can still apply some of those same principles of the trope of a plot twist where, you're not just pulling it out of your ass. You're not just like changing something for the sake of changing something. You're doing it because it is in service of the story. And now for thrillers, mysteries, they have a standard expectation of what that story looks like. And you can take that and apply it to other interesting places. But I'm going to move on. What makes a good twist, in my opinion? This is all incredibly subjective, but these are the things that I not only came from my own little tired brain and soul while I was putting this together, but also came from, I did a little crowdsourcing. I went on Reddit and I typed, what do you think makes a good twist? And, you can get a lot of interesting answers about what people think makes something like this good. But there are a lot of standard answers that I saw come up. For example, this is probably the one of the bigger ones of what makes a twist good is it should make you reconsider the prior events of the story and view them in a new light. And it should be a surprise that is for both the reader and the character. And my example for this is Ender's Game. If we go back to talking about that, you learn that the game that he's been playing is actually a real war that he has been waging on behalf of Earth against a alien species, and he ends up genociding them on behalf of Earth without knowing. And it's a surprise for him. It's a surprise for the reader. It changes the entire context of the story. Previously, it's very, very interesting, but it is built up. It's not like it comes out of nowhere. They describe the technologies that make it possible. They talk about how shifty the whole game is and all that leading up to it. And they do know that they're being prepared for war with these beings. They just don't think it's happening this way. So I think, that is what, there's all those elements there that exist, and you can piece it together and view it in a new light once the twist arrives, as it were. Unless anyone's going to fight me on that, I'm going to move on. Like I said, I think it should be obvious in hindsight to the point that some people will figure out ahead of time. Like, and I don't think it's bad that you figured out the village twist ahead of time. I think that's actually not the marker of what makes a bad twist, because if a twist comes out of nowhere with no setup, no foreshadowing whatsoever, I don't actually consider that personally for me a good twist. I don't think, I've been, my expectations have been subverted. I think someone needed to make the story interesting and didn't do the footwork to set up the interesting payoff, but they just pulled something surprising out of their butt. I do think that a good twist answers a question that is posed by the plot. For example, in The Sixth Sense, why is Bruce Willis's marriage so strained? Why won't she look at him? Why won't she talk to him? That kind of thing. And then you find out she literally cannot because he's dead. That is the kind of twist that's like, oh man, fucking come on, dude. That's what I'm talking about when it feels good. So, we can rag on M. Night Shyamalan, but the man did pull off some really, really good twists at some point in his life.
I think Anna has a story about ruining something for someone in the theater, just being right there.
I ruin all kinds of twists. I see them coming, and then I'll be watching something with my husband, and I'll be like, "Oh, this is going to happen," and then 5 minutes later, it happens, and he's like, "How'd you know?" And I'm like, "I'm paying attention. I don't know what to tell you."
I'll put the clues together, buddy.
About plot.
Some people, this is the writer brain, right? The writer brain is like, what's putting the story together? What are the bits and bobs that are important? What's the scene work? And then there are people that are just like, this is a sequence of events that I'm watching, and this is happening to me. And that's the different brains that experience the twists versus figure them out ahead of time.
Yeah, I put in the chat, we're watching a second season of Shadow and Bone, and there's a really great, and I have not read the books, so I don't have any context for any of this. And so there's a really great late season twist in season 2. And at the beginning of the episode where it happened, I was like, oh, this is totally going to happen. It's going to be blah, blah, blah. And then halfway through the episode, they're like, oh yeah, by the way, it's blah, blah, blah. And all the characters are surprised. And I'm like, sorry.
So I figured it out, baby.
Another one.
I do think that a good twist also, like I said here, is it's consistent. It's not just, out of nowhere. It's not just tonally jarring. It's not like you walk in and everyone's been happy for an episode and then you just fucking shoot somebody in the head. Or not that episode, but the whole show up to this point has been just happy-go-lucky little people doing little fun things. And then suddenly there's a slaughter, and that's the twist. And it's like, that's not intriguing, really. It's like you just put your setup way 5 episodes in so that you could have a twist in your story. But I do think a good twist makes everything that comes before it and after it interesting. It changes those events. It's, like I said, the phrase of turning the corner, where you realize where you're headed and why and what's going on. For example, in The Prestige, you learn that Christian Bale's transportation trick, the one that drives Hugh Jackman crazy, the one that makes him go to extreme mad science lengths to also replicate it, is actually two twin brothers just doing a very simple trick, but pretending their whole lives to be one person. And the movie kind of deals with this as you watch their two personalities clash, but doesn't outright tell you that this is what's happening. And then Hugh Jackman subsequently has his own plot twist where you realize what has happened with his trick, where he is drowning his own clones to keep them from spreading the truth, basically. So he gets a device made by David Bowie's Tesla that teleports people at first, and they're like, yay. But what it really does is it just creates a second copy a couple 100 feet away. And so what Hugh Jackman does is he sets up this elaborate device to drown the original person standing on the machine, while the second clone is, so really it's not the clone, it's the original that dies each time. Doing into theories of consciousness and all that, but the clone transports over to a new place and pops up, and everyone goes, ooh, he teleported. So, and that is the kind of thing, like the whole trick of the transportation thing is what makes the story interesting, and also how Christopher Nolan explores that between these characters and what drives them. It's emblematic of them, really. But yeah, so if you think back to the twists we've all thought of, we've been talking about, what makes them good in your opinion? Do they break these rules? I mean, I'm just like talking out my butt here. Or do they follow them? Or do they kind of twist with them a bit? Has there ever been, for example, in your opinion, a good twist that really did come out of nowhere, that was not set up in any way, but it did make everything interesting, and it did establish a new, maybe, dynamic that makes the story fun?
See, I feel like that is surrealism.
Yeah.
It's not putting, like the things together in the story that are going to foreshadow this or contextualize it. It is possible to use it, and it can completely change what the world is, but and that is just a different technique that is using surrealism. And you can drop somebody into a different world. You can absolutely reorder what it is. And the one thing I think of is Succession, which, this is more recent, but still not a big spoiler. It's been all over. In the 4 or 5 seasons of it, has totally been about, like the father was going to die in the first episode and he doesn't. So him surviving means that all the kids are fighting over the spoils that are about to come to them. So when he finally does pass away, it is so jarring, because everything in the show has been up till then about what's about to happen, this anticipation. And it is done off screen with no drama and no, like heartfelt, scene in the hospital or whatever. So it just becomes a, slap in the face to the viewer, and divisive, very divisive for sure.
Dan mentioned Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which I think is funny, because in a genre like comedy, what is a plot twist but a punchline? Like, you set up one thing by asking a question or with a scenario, and then you veer off, and that's what makes comedy. But it's also sometimes what makes a plot twist interesting. I think is funny. I have not read The Invisible Life, but
from the chat, yeah, The Invisible Life of Addis LaRue follows the story and follows the rules and makes the story work. That's cool.
All right, I'm gonna move on because we're already halfway through.
I'm going to step to Sean's real quick, which is originally Clerks was supposed to end with the main clerk being shot. And glad that Kevin Smith got rid of that twist, which Sarah replies to. Very dark. And that is right. It was supposed to be a very dark comedy, and that was his idea. He pulled it out at the end and didn't do that, him getting shot at the end, but it completely changes the story for sure and opens up all the sequels.
So let's talk about bad twists. Let's talk about the crappy ones. Let's talk about the real stinkerinos. What makes a bad twist? One of the things that always pissed me off with like a really bad twist is when it's done by withholding information from the reader audience member, but the character's in on it. That one just makes me upset, because it's like, no, you're just not doing, like, unless we're literally doing an unreliable narrator, or the kind of gist of the story is that the character is trying to lie to the reader, and that kind of story, right? That is a different kind of story. The super cheesy magician movies, they're so cheesy, and they're also literally impossible. These people are not sleight of hand magicians, they're actual wizards. They have telekinetic control of the things around them. They don't just, they literally disappear. They cast Misty Step. They don't they don't just disappear in a cloud of smoke. They actually cast spells. I refuse to believe they're normal people.
Which is hilarious. No, everything they're doing is just so fake. Oh my god. But it's filmmaking. It's about filmmaking to me.
I just don't like a heist movie about sleight of hand magicians that relies on magic to make it happen rather than actual sleight of hand fun stuff. But I guess they couldn't do better than Ocean's 11 or something. I don't know. But it is a good example of why this kind of twist pissed me off. And I remember watching this movie and hating it and forgetting about it until I started researching this again. But the FBI agent played by Mark Ruffalo chasing the main characters turns out to be also one of these weird magicians in on a secret society. But there's zero hints, and none of the other characters know that he's actually in on this up until the twist reveal when he reveals in a prison. He's in a prison cell with Morgan Freeman. He goes in, he locks himself in there, and they're talking about it. And he's like, unless they had someone on the inside. And then Morgan Freeman looks back, and Mark Ruffalo is no longer in the fucking cell without opening or closing the door. There's no contraptions to get him out there. He's just standing on the outside of the cell looking smug all of a sudden. And it's like, what the fuck? Like, none of that made sense. And it comes out of left field with no explanation, no buildup. That, for me, was a terrible twist. That is like bad twist 101. Even if
I gotta say, Ian, I did get hints of it while watching it the first time. About halfway through, okay,
it's all the sexy camera work and the music
it's who's the son of the dead magician, and I did get hints of it in there for sure.
I did not. I like, it was just like, all right, I'm gonna move on because I'm gonna get angry if we keep arguing about this. I'm not actually angry, but here's another one. A twist that it just kind of is there for the sake of being there. It doesn't provide a satisfactory challenge to the story, and it seems needless. It Was All a Dream, I would say, fits this kind of bad twist. Like, it's just like someone going, oh, and it was all a dream. It's almost as if they put the twist in just to piss you off on purpose, which, could work, but it'd have to be really well executed to actually piss me off in a way that later made me go, all right, I'll give it to him. But Hancock, I felt like this was kind of this twist, this needless addition, not in the sense of the weird Game of Thrones, we're just subverting expectations, which I will include in my bad twist list, but more in the sense of they didn't really know what to do with the middle sections, so they just kind of arced the story in a weird way. For example, in Hancock, which is about a drunk, apathetic Superman character played by Will Smith, we learn suddenly out of nowhere that Charlize Theron, who is married to what's his name, Jason Sudeikis? No, the other one, the other weird white comedic guy that's in Mike Judge's stuff. Why can't I get his name? Anyway, she's married to him, and we learned that in the middle of the movie that she's actually also a demigod character like Will Smith's character, and that they'd known each other the whole time, except Will Smith had amnesia, so he couldn't remember somehow, and were long lost lovers and can only be powerful while not in love together. It just was tonally weird, and it felt at odds with a movie that up to that point was an interesting premise about a drunk, apathetic Superman that was not very good at being Superman, but trying to be better as he worked with a PR dude. It just kind of changed the arc of the film in not a good way, in my opinion. But so you don't even remember it. You don't even remember that was part of the movie. You remember the setup.
No impression. I remember seeing the movie Hancock.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking that Will Smith's character was compelling, but I did not remember that twist at all. It made zero impression, apparently.
Yeah, no, it's not good. And it's not bad, but it's forgettable. And it's technically a twist because it twists the story in a new arc. It's just not a fun one. It doesn't turn a fun corner. Okay, so Event Horizon is interesting. I actually do like that whole weird twist as they reveal they're in hell. But I also love Lovecraftian weird horror stuff. So that may just be like a genre thing. I don't know. It was interesting to me. I don't know if they called it hell, but it was like that horrible pain dimension that was basically the warp from Warhammer 40K or whatever. But some people might be upset that I included this image. This is one of my last bad one tropes, but doing it for the sake of subverting expectations, not because it fits with the story. For example, Arya in Game of Thrones killing the Night King out of nowhere, even though she wasn't really set up to do that, or it wasn't part of her character arc, as opposed to being part of Jon Snow's character arc.
Ian,
yeah,
I'm going to argue with you on this one.
Okay, that's fine. I don't care. We can argue in a second. I want to finish into what I'm saying. I know that they tried to like justify it by Melisandre's like, you'll close many eyes, green eyes, brown eyes, blue eyes, and everyone's like, blue eyes, it's the Ice King. And it's like, no, she just was like listing eye colors before that. It's part of for the reason I included, because it's like the number one plot event that is part of an arc of them just killing random people. A better one might be an actual element of this, the death of Barristan Selmy, where you learn that Barristan Selmy, the character, is alive in the book still, but they killed him off in the show after he made an impassioned plea to keep the character on because the character's still in the books and doing important things. And they said that just made us want to kill him off more, and we were trying to subvert expectations. And I felt like giving the role of killing the Night King to Arya was along those lines of, we're just doing this because it's unexpected, not because it's interesting. And Anna, I'm willing to hear your counter argument for sure.
I mean, yeah, like, so as much, and I actually talked about Arya Stark in my presentation on Mary Sue's, because a lot of people think she's a Mary Sue, especially in the show, and I disagree for several reasons. But you know, as many problems, my cat has come to join me. As many problems as the show has, I think that Arya Stark eventually being the one to kill the Night King, I think it works in that, like, all of her power and skill that she built up throughout the show, she earned it all through, it wasn't easy for her to gain her skill and power. I mean, she went through a lot throughout the whole course of the show in order to become what she was at the end. And then at the end, she didn't kill the Night King alone, because there was a whole big fight with him before she showed up. And then she shows up and she's in the right place at the right time, and everyone else is tired, and she manages to be the one to do it. So I think that I thought it worked, and it didn't really seem to come out of nowhere, because they're like, yeah, everyone's fighting, there's this big war happening in the background, but then there's also this showdown with the Night King with several of the principal characters, and Arya happens to be the one who scores the final blow, which anyway, I think it works.
So the reason I think it doesn't is not, it's also because Bran is like sitting there the whole time like this and knows that this is all going to happen. So really what you're saying is she just happens to be there, not from Bran's perspective. And this is kind of getting into his weird omniscient stuff, but he sees the whole plot of the story and he just like sits in a chair to make it happen. And we get this really weird contrived thing where the Night King's just like walking up to him and like, I'm going to kill you. And then Theon does his thing. And I think also everything else around it sucked.
I think the main problem surrounding the final Night King showdown is what they did with Bran's story arc.
That's true. It's definitely.
I think that's the problem. I don't think it's Arya. I think the problem is what they did with Bran.
Yeah, I could have definitely picked a better example. This was just the one that stuck out in my memory. But I still think it was kind of they talked when they did interviews and talking about why they chose Arya to be the one to deliver the final blow. It wasn't ever because they never gave the reason we thought it fit the story. It was more like, oh, it's exciting. It's not what people are expecting. And I think going into writing a twist with that motive is not the right way to approach writing a twist, in my opinion. That's just me.
I get on my soapbox about Arya because I think she's been unfairly minimized by fans of the show, calling her a Mary Sue and saying she inexplicably became powerful. It's like, no, she suffered. She was blind She was magically made to be blind for a very long time, and she suffered for the power that she gained.
But I agree. 100%.
Such a buildup. There's such a buildup for the Night King. This is going to take a battle, and it's going to almost wipe us out in order to defeat this super big bad. And then super big bad has a fight that lasts for 5 minutes when everybody else who had a shittier army had longer fights. And, bro is dead.
Well, you can't even see during the scenes because the lighting is so bad and it's so dark. You can't even see what's happening. So,
I think the reason it upsets
people, that's the showrunner's problem.
And there was so many bad elements in that season because it was just accelerated to all end, and half of the plot events happened because it felt like the writers were like, "What's going to be the most shocking thing we do?" Another example.
We got to move forward.
Yeah, I know. I will say this. Another one, because this is the one I get on my soapbox about, is Daenerys losing a dragon because she didn't see a whole fleet of ships below her. That's a twist that subverts expectations, but it's just really shittily done and written. You can have her lose a dragon in way more interesting ways. In fact, when she loses one of her dragons to the Night King, that one was executed far more, in my opinion, at the moment, more interestingly. The setup to get there was a little janky, but we'll let that go. I'm gonna move on. You're right. I'm gonna move on because I felt a lot of strong emotions about that show because it was really so good, and then it wasn't great, but at the end. But my final point on what I think makes a bad one, as opposed to a good twist, which makes everything about the story interesting now. A bad one cheapens everything that came before it and after it. For example, in Spectre, we learned that the Daniel Craig continuity of James Bond, that his weird half-brother James Blofeld, I think I'm getting those details right, but I might be a little off on all the relations. James Blofeld was the mysterious guy setting up every other single villain in all the James Bond movies that have starred Daniel Craig, even the first one with Casino Royale, where it's just a very cool, intriguing, that movie's really good. And that movie has a great twist. I'm thinking about it with, what's her name's character? Green. But anyway, James Blofeld is the architect of all his pain or whatever. And it's just one of those things that it makes the other movies retroactively feel is that really that? None of these people were acting on their own agency. They all just did what you wanted just because you have a personal vendetta against James Bond. And I know they did that to try and make this villain seem like the biggest one, and there's so many other ways they could have gone around Blofeld being the mastermind of stuff, but I decided to try and make it all seem like an interconnected series of events, and in doing so it felt cheap to a lot of people. I'm not the only one that felt that way. I saw many people commenting when I was doing a little digging around on what people thought were good and bad twists. This one came up as a bad one quite often. But what are some of your least favorite twists? What do you think sucks? What do you think, what did they, and really not just just don't, I know I've been sitting here arguing about Game of Thrones and arguing why half the twists they wrote were terrible. I want people to think about not just, what did they not like, but why didn't you like it? And what did it fail to do for the story? What was it trying to do, and what did it not accomplish, basically?
So I think someone mentioned this in the chat already, but this is kind of a non-specific one. I don't like "it was all a dream" twists. I really don't. Or yeah, I mean, it was all a dream. It basically, like you said, it feels like it cheapens everything that happened in the story because it didn't really happen, because they were just dreaming it. And that is my personal least favorite type of twist, just in general.
I agree. I did see an interesting anecdote. I forget the story, but someone brought it up in writing, where they talked about it was all a dream. That was an interesting twist, where a guy is set to be hanged in a Western scenario, but he gets free and he runs off and has a whole adventure, and he's trying to get home to his wife and kids. And as he sees his wife and kids at a distance, it's a short story, so it's not that much investment of time. As he gets home, his vision starts to blur and fade, and his legs fail, and he can't get to his wife and kids. And you find out, no, he never actually escaped from the rope. He's been dying this whole time. He's been having this end of life delusion. Technically, that was it's all a dream, but done in a way that didn't feel bad.
Yeah, I think that's a little different. Rather than at the end he wakes up and it's oh man,
Yeah, it's
wow,
true.
what an adventure I had. But like, this is like at the end, he's dying. And like, that's poignant, is like the final thing that he thinks of is getting back to his family. And that feels more poignant in light of the twist versus they wake up and it's like, oh man, I've been asleep and I had this really great dream or this really terrible dream or whatever. But someone in the chat, let's see, Nicole in the chat said the second Ginger Snaps movie. I haven't seen that.
Me neither.
But she says it ruined the whole premises of the movie without a good explanation. Yeah. Twists that do that, I don't like.
Yeah, not a fan of like retroactively ruining your whole story. I don't enjoy it. Like, and like for me, that's not to get back on the Game of Thrones. And this is not just about the Night King at this point. This is about, how they ended in general, how Daenerys' whole arc went down, how they sped run 6 episodes, which should have really been 2 seasons of material to build it up properly. It does kind of feel like when you get a really bad twist, for example, Bran knowing the whole time that he's going to come down here and be crowned king without any emotions attached to his arc at all. He's just kind of like appearing in places and being mysterious. That is the kind of stuff that ruins, like I can acknowledge the first like 4 or 5 seasons of Game of Thrones are 10 out of 10. Fantastic, fantastic television. Still would enjoy to watch if I didn't know it was coming in the last half. But I do agree that anything that like just makes me not enjoy the rest of the story kind of sucks.
Yeah. I was wondering, I asked in the chat how people feel about the twist in Lost, if people have watched Lost.
What is the twist of Lost? Isn't Lost just like it doesn't stop twisting, right?
Well, there's a final twist in Lost, which is essentially that they all died.
That's like
the whole show they were in like this secondary nether world preparing for where they're going to go next in the afterlife or whatever.
So it's just Catholicism with the numbers filed off. I do remember hearing about this, actually. I'd forgotten about it because I fell off of Lost in like season 3 or 4, where it became apparent that J.J. Abrams was just doing J.J. Abrams loves his mystery box, where he is more interested in the premise and setup of a whole series rather than any actual arc of storytelling, of like a complete arc. He's much more interested in, he'd be really good making open world video games, but or starting a D&D campaign perhaps, but and then letting the players finish it. But he just has this weird tendency to like make a really interesting question as the start of his series and then not know how to answer that question. That's probably a pretty good, like J.J. Abrams twists tend to not really make a ton of sense. They tend to border on, Sean, you're saying, the surreal almost, in that it kind of just feels like you reached for an answer and put it with a nonsensical question sometimes.
And I gotta say this, which is, favorite twist, and I have one that is basically like, it's not a twist, is what I like. When a plan comes together completely at the very end, and the quintessential, not, spoilery example, whatever, is Avengers Endgame, when you hear Falcon say, "on your left."
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, all the portals open. I got a little tear in my eye. In Banks, he's very good at that in a lot of his books, but Accession is one as well that was like, it made me tear up a little bit of like how the story came together. And it was a little bit out of left field. You could consider it twist adjacent. That's what I love in those kind of,
Right. Last section is writing a twist, which is only 1 slide. Because I think this is pretty subjective. I think this is extremely everyone's going to approach this differently. And as we've said, some of us hate twists that some of us love. So, I do think that you should think about the genre you're in if you ever try to write a twist. If you're ever thinking about, for example, if you're writing a mystery, if you're writing a thriller, it's almost expected that you're going to write a twist. So you should have that planned way ahead of time if you're doing that. But, if you're thinking about a twist in a fantasy story, for example, you might think about twisting an expected trope. I'll go back to actually not fantasy, Unbreakable, the M. Night Shyamalan superhero movie, which takes the stock superhero trope of the man in the chair, which is Mr. Glass, and then the person that is the intelligence that's telling the brawny main character what to do, who turns out to be the hidden secret villain of the movie. And I'm sure that's been in comic books before M. Night Shyamalan got his hands on it, but it is probably one of my earliest exposures to that version. But I think, like, you want to think about what tropes in your genre or, standard plot beats you could play with that would make an interesting twist. You also probably want to know the audience of your genre. For example, we've discussed this. Readers of romance are not super intrigued by a plot twist where, for example, the main love interests don't end up together, or at least not in a happy for now situation. We've discussed this to a pretty extensive, but you wouldn't want to create a plot twist where, they're not going to end up together because it turns out that one of them is a serial killer or something. You want to think about the logic of your story. You want to think about, the events that preceded this. You don't want to make something that is a deus ex machina or just like a ass pool, as it were, which is my preferred literary term. But you want it to feel like it fits in with the logical events. You want it. The way I heard it was you give the reader the map of your story, and then you give them multiple possible interpretations and suggest one. And then when you're ready to pull the rug, you introduce an actual interpretation or a different interpretation that makes them go, oh shit, as long as it still fits within that logical map of your story. You want to think about whether you even need one or if you're just doing it to subvert expectations. You don't want to do that. In my opinion, I don't think going out to plot twist for the sake of plot twist is a good thing unless you're, for example, writing a mystery where it's expected. I think like if you're going into, for example, writing a 8-season fantasy series and you decide to subvert expectations for the sake of subverting expectations, all you're going to do is lose a lot of reader audience goodwill. And the final thing about reading a twist is, make it fun for yourself. Don't just do it for the sake of doing it. Do it because your heart called out to it, because your evil little gremlin mind said, wouldn't it be awful if my readers were reading this and thinking one thing, and then I pull the rug out from under them and laugh at them as they realize the horror of the situation. And this is definitely not personal for me at all. I'm not kicking my own feet.
Yeah, not about the just turned in. Let me throw this into the conversation, which is to say that if you want to write plot twists, you have to know your genre extremely well.
Yes, yeah.
This is absolutely about you, and this goes to Memento as well, which was absolutely Christopher Nolan knowing the genre so well of noir mysteries that he was frustrated with it. You have to know your genre so well that you're like, I'm not going to do the same thing as everybody else. I'm going to take it one step further by putting this in there that surprises me. So a lot of times plot twists are about the author more than it is about the reader or watcher in this case.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And that is part of the genre, but definitely knowing it really well. Because if you do try to do a twist that is like, well, it's just another trope, no one's going to think it's original, or it's not going to be the plot twist everyone talks about. Definitely agree with you on there. But yeah, I think that's the end of my presentation. If I hit the next slide. Yeah, thanks for coming. If you have any other questions or you want to talk about it, we do have like 3 minutes until 2. I'm very happy to shoot the shit a little more, debate, argue, hear more about different twists that you really liked or hated. But before you do that, I'll say this was presented by me, Ian Michael Everett. I'm an editor at Tomeworks. You can email me at ian@tomeworksedits.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at Ian Michael Eve. You can also check out Inheritors at inheritorserial.com, which I'll put that in the chat.
I also want to have AP let us know what we're doing next week. And I apologize, guys. I do not have a listing up, but you can definitely follow us at HIA at Eventbrite. Just follow your Eventbrite ticket back to where you got it, and you will get notifications when I get that up this afternoon.
I had a panicky moment where I was like, oh crap, what am I talking about next week? But so next week, I'll be talking about using sensory language in your writing. So, we see a lot of writing that has a lot of visual language because, of course, you want to describe the scene that your characters are in. But how do you incorporate the other senses into your writing to make your scenes feel more real and lived in? So we're going to be talking about that next week.
Great. That's great.
Yeah, definitely need that for me for future drafts.
Let me throw this for on the current topic, on a plot twist and stuff, and just say the breadcrumbs are kind of the most important thing. And so if you're writing something and you come to a point where you're like, I really want to do this plot twist, you're going to go back in your next round of editing and make sure that subtle as well as, semi-subtle hints are dropped in on the way to that plot twist. So there's a lot of chances for you to put things in there that people might not get on the first watch, on the first read. And that's perfectly fine, because a good plot twist leaves a lot of second read things where you're either going to have to reflect yourself or watch it a second time. And that becomes a second, book in that case, because if you can read it with the knowledge of where this is all leading, it changes all the context of what's before it. And that is super important to leaving your readers with maybe not a conscious knowing of this is coming, a subconscious. And that's where learning about plot and learning about the things that authors, like, everything is in there for a reason, is important, because then as you learn more and you learn your genre more, as AP is talking about going to films and ruining them for the person sitting next to them, that's cause she has learned more about what is to be expected, to the point of, okay, this is not only going to be, something that's easy, in the third act that's going to come back, yada, yada, but that it will be, that the plot twist will be projected forward, the thing that you're not supposed to expect.
Now, just being able to predict twists doesn't mean I find them unsatisfying. I still get very, very happy when I'm vindicated, and it's like, yes, all of that build up that I saw, it all paid off.
Yeah. One of my favorite kinds of twists is when you get hit with the truck like one chapter before or one scene before, and you're like, no, this can't be what they're doing, and then and then it's confirmed in the next scene, and you're like, no. That's what I love, that kind of twist. That's one of my favorites.
I like throwing in an unreliable narrator to kind of lead the reader into making some decisions about what's going on that are not true, and the main character kind of like plays with that, and sometimes he confirms it, sometimes he doesn't.
Yeah, unreliable narrators are fun.
Yeah,
the ways you can play around with them, and like how the story is different than what they're telling the reader. So yeah, they can be really fun.
Right. Yeah. I've got one unreliable narrator is an old doctor who is hanging out at the bar the whole time, and my main character goes to him for advice and stuff, and about half what he tells him is true and half what he tells him is not true. So he has to sort through that in his detective, life.
Nice.
Pretty cool. I think we are out of time now, though. So I'm closing the platform. I'm drawing the curtains. Do we have anything we need to talk about for future?
No, I think we're good. Make sure to get some sleep, Ian. Absolutely. And we'll be reading your manuscript in the group. And thank you so much for the presentation today about plot twists. Putting them together, thinking about them, and why not you should have a plot twist in your book. Awesome.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you guys
Thanks
so
everybody.
much. Absolutely. And see you guys next week on Thursday, 1:00 for Writer's Lunch. Absolutely. Take care.
Peace out.